Hey guys, hope everybody's doing all right. Hope you're having a good morning or afternoon or evening, depending on when you get to watch this. But we are going over week 4 of our series with the gospel according to Satan. When I was young, I always used to get overexcited when it was about to snow. Have you ever felt that way? If I feel like unless you've lived in the mountains your whole life, or even if you have, or somewhere where it snows a lot, anytime it snows during the wintertime, you go crazy because it's exciting, right? Like it's something we don't normally see. Sometimes we get out of school. Like it's all these unique and cool things that comes with a snow day. And I remember we had a pretty big snow when I was younger, probably 5th or 6th grade. And I remember we had been out of school for like a couple days. And it's like for every half inch of snow we got like a day off of school. So, it's a ridiculous proportion. It probably wasn't like that, but that's just what it felt like, It's like it snows a couple inches, school's closed for a week, Grocery stores are empty, right? We definitely played the stereotype because I'm from like the Charlotte area. So like we don't get near as much snow as we do up here. But I remember it snowed and a lot of people thought we were going to go back to school the next day. And I've been staying up late and sleeping in, and I finally was going to do that again. And my dad said, "Son, you need to go to bed." And I said, "Why? Like, we haven't had school the past 3 days. Like, I don't think we're going to have it tomorrow." And he said, "Son, I think you're going to go to school tomorrow. The roads are clear. It's not supposed to be below freezing tonight. You're probably going to school." And I was like, "Dad, come on. Like, that there's going to be a 2-hour delay, And what I was thinking about in that moment was like, there's at least going to be a 2-hour delay or school's going to be canceled because I feel like that's what I want. I feel like that's what is supposed to happen. That's what has happened in the past. And I'll let those feelings in that moment dictate what I had planned to do with the rest of my day or the rest of my night." And he made me go to bed. And I went to bed really mad at him. And you know what? I woke up the next morning and class started at 7:45 like it always does, right? So I was wrong. But in that moment, I had let those feelings of desiring, not wanting to go to school, to affect the way I was planning my night. And if I hadn't listened to my dad, I would have been really tired the next day, right? So we've all been there when we've let our feelings dictate our reality. And that's what we're talking about this week. The fourth lie that Satan would love to have you believe about God is that your feelings are reality. That your feelings are reality. There's a couple things I want us to learn about this. There's 2 ways to look at this, first off. One, we can go with the super slack approach where we're sensitive to your feelings are important and they matter and all those things. And I think if we sway too far onto that side, then we endanger ourselves of believing something that's not true. But there's a famous quote by Ben Shapiro, which I don't know if he's like the one that came up with it or not, but he says it a lot on his shows. He says, "Facts don't care about your feelings." Facts don't care about your feelings. And I get that. Facts are not subjected to the way we feel. That's an accurate statement. But if we err too much on that side, then we completely take feelings out of the picture, and before you know it, we become like robots that don't have feelings, that don't have emotions. And that's not how God created us to be. The first thing I want us to see is that God created us to have emotions and feelings. That's in His perfect design. Even before sin entered the world, we were emotional beings and emotional creatures. And so I want us to look at the story of Job today. The story of Job is a really sad story about how one of God's faithful servants was so godly and so faithful that Satan wanted to test one of God's most faithful people. And he said, "You may test my servant Job." He takes his kids from him. He destroys his property, his livestock. All his wealth has basically gone away. And Job is a good man. Job, by our standards, doesn't deserve any of this. But ultimately, he has everything stripped away from him. And the entire 42 chapters of this book is about a conversation between God and Job. And then, some of his friends chime in and they try to make theories about, well, I think you were being a man that lacked faith, Job. Or I think you were, maybe you're deserving this. Maybe you're not understanding how sinful you truly are, right? Really not being helpful in that moment. Like a man's just lost all his kids. He has like painful diseases. He's lost all his money and all his wealth. And then you sit there and say, "Yeah, I think you were living life like pretty poorly, and this is why that's happened." Not the best like bedside manner, if you will, for a person. All right, But we pick up in chapter 14, and I just want to look at a couple verses today that go along with this message. And so I want to read Job chapter 14, verses 5 through 6 for you. Okay? Job chapter 14, verses 5 through 6. It says, "Since a person's days are determined, and the number of his months depends on you, and since you have set limits he cannot pass, look away from him, and let him rest, so that he can enjoy his day like a hired worker." What's he saying? Well, basically he's saying, like, God, lay off of me, please. Like, cut me some slack. I can't take anymore. It's enough that you determine how long I'll live, and it's another thing now that you come and give me hardship, and give me trials, and give me moments where I feel like I can't even continue on. Why can't you just let me be? This is Job's response. Now, what you notice about that is Job is very much speaking out of his feelings. He's speaking out of his emotions. He's distraught. He's angry. He's sad. He's depressed. And the reality is that he can't take any more. God, if you already know when I'm going to leave this earth, why can't I just live it in peace? You know? It's not necessarily a godly response. And sometimes I think that we have to be so perfect with God that we can't be honest with him. Guys, there's going to be things that you're going through, and maybe you're going through them right now, that you're just mad at God. And look, I'm here to tell you that it's okay to voice your displeasure to him. Because look, we're human beings, right? We're human beings that have real emotions, and we're not supposed to suppress those, and not even to God. Like, God sees right through us, so why would we try to hide those? Instead, with those emotions, we keep the truth in mind, which is what we're going to get to here in a little bit later. But Job is just, he's voicing his frustration. He's angry. He's sad. He's depressed. He's miserable physically, emotionally, mentally. Like, Job has it really bad. But God created us that way, to experience emotions, to experience feelings that will ultimately sway our minds to making decisions based off those things, right? I don't think that's how God wants them to be, but the reality is that when we float with our emotions long enough, they're going to cause us to feel a certain way. The second thing I want you to know is that hope defies what we feel, and it demands what we don't. Hope defies what we feel, and it demands what we don't. Here's what I mean by that. Look at Job chapter 14 still. So we're going to be in chapter 14, but we're going to look at verses 13 and 14, all right? And this is where Job begins to shape it up a little bit. And I am flying through the story of Job, and so if you want to go read that while you have some extra time on your hands, it's an incredible story. But Job chapter 14, verses 13 through 14. "If only you would hide me in Sheol and conceal me until your anger passes. If only you would appoint a time for me and then remember me. When a person dies, will he come back to life? If so, I would wait all the days of my struggle until my relief comes." This is what the author of this book says about this passage. Job is saying, in essence, my hope is that will be worth it. My hope is that this will be worth it. What Job is going through, he's saying, my hope is that this whole thing will be worth it. He's not saying, oh, I hope it's worth it. No, he's saying, my hope is that I know it will be worth it. So even if he can't see through the tears and the pain, he knows he can endure given the end that's coming. He knows he can endure given the end that's coming. Here's the reality. In the midst of hard times, in the midst of trial, however big or however small, the reality is that we know that it will be worth it in the end because it's for Christ, right? Romans 8:28 tells us that all things work together for the good of those that love him and that are called according to his purpose. So believer, that is you. That is your reality that you hold on to in the hard times, in the times of struggle, that he is guiding you. He is holding your hand. He's never let you go. Even though you might have to go through painful things, he's still there right beside you in the midst of it. So there, hope defies what we feel. See, in that moment, if we were basing things just off our feelings and our emotions, then we're not going to feel that way. We're not going to feel like, we're not going to know that our hope in the end is going to make this whole thing worth it. No, we're going to feel depressed and sad. And that's why our feelings can't be reality. Because in that moment, we have a very small piece of the picture when we don't even see what the big picture has in mind. I want to read another verse to you out of the book of Romans, Romans chapter 8, We recently did a series on Romans chapter 8, called it the greatest chapter in the Bible. Can't really argue against that. So it's incredible. But Romans chapter 8, verses 24 through 25. For in this hope we were saved. Now hope that is seen is not hope. For who hopes for what he sees? But if we hope for what we do not see, we wait for it with patience. In the middle of the storm, in the middle of the trial, in the middle of your feelings, right? You can't really see what your hope is. Because if your hope is a visible thing that's right in front of you, then it's going to be quarantine, or it's going to be social isolation, or social anxiety, or depression, or family issues, or financial issues, or an addiction, or friend drama, boyfriend-girlfriend disputes, whatever it may be, whatever you're going through as a teenager, or if any adults are watching, as an adult and as a parent, whatever it may be, if you rely on what's right in front of you, you'll never be able to have hope, right? Because our hope is in the thing that is not seen, right? Our hope is something that supersedes anything that's material, anything that's right in front of us. Our hope is greater than that. Our hope is in Jesus. And if there's any picture you want to see for that, we're in the perfect time to see that. As we're celebrating Easter this weekend, we're celebrating Resurrection Sunday. And 2 days from now, on Friday, we remember that Jesus died on the cross for us. And there's a whole lot of significance to that I could talk about for hours. But here's the reality, folks, is that if we want to see a picture of hope, we look to the cross. We look to what he endured for us. It was the joy that was set before us, the deliverance of our souls that held him there on the cross. The satisfaction of God's wrath that was poured out on Jesus on the cross was ultimately what he did for us, so we didn't have to do it ourselves. So if we want to see a picture of hope and deliverance, this weekend's a perfect chance to look at that as we celebrate his crucifixion and on Sunday his resurrection. Last thing I want you to know, and I'll be done. Our feelings are affected by a small piece of the reality. Our feelings are affected by a small piece of the reality. My mom loves to do puzzles, right? During this time, she's been doing like a puzzle every day. And I'm not talking like 100 pieces. I'm talking like 1,000-piece puzzles. So I don't have the patience for that or the intellect for that. It would take me days, and she does them in hours. And so, but the thing about a puzzle is that if you just take one random piece out of a 1,000-piece puzzle, you might have an opinion of what it might look like. It could be a dark piece. It could be a brighter piece. It could be very colorful. It could be, squarely shaped, or it could be one of those really funky looking pieces that has almost teeth looking parts on its edge. You don't know what the full picture looks like based on looking at one tiny piece of the puzzle. Think about a straw. If you look through a straw, you can only see a very small portion of it. And when we allow our feelings to dictate and demand what the reality actually is, when we allow that to happen, we're looking at life through a straw. We're looking at one piece of a 1,000-piece puzzle. Guys, there's something called God's providence that you're able to see. You can look back in your life, and maybe you can even do it now. Look back to where your life was a couple years ago, and think about the things that you were frustrated with. Think about the things that caused you anxiety, or things that caused you distress. And think about how just angry those things made you in those times. And look at where you are now. Think about how God used that in your life to make you a better disciple. And so the reason this is such a lie, and the reason that we're talking about all of these things, is because they're so easy to believe. It preys on the most influential part of our beings, and that's our feelings, right? Our feelings are dictated by circumstances. Our faith in God is dictated by a person that's unchanging, and that's Jesus Christ. That's our Lord and Savior. And so, as we think about this topic of that your feelings are not reality, we have to strike this balance of the fact that we do have emotions and feelings that are given by God, but hope defies what we feel and demands what we don't. and that what you're going through right now might just be a small piece of the puzzle. All right? So I hope that gives you hope today. I hope that gives you hope moving forward during this time. Thanks, guys. I love you, miss you, and can't wait to when this thing is finally over and we get to be together again. All right. Thanks, guys. Have a great night.